now. Our webinar today is on wisdom of elders, women's rite of passage. And at this time, I would like to introduce our presenter, Teresa Strawberry. Teresa Strawberry is a Wellbrighty elder from Alberta, Canada. She's a member of the Elder Advisory Board for Alberta Education. And yes, ready to start. And any questions that you guys have, we will monitor them in the chat box, and in the end, you can address them. Let's start.
So you would like me to start?
Yes.
I can hardly hear you, so when you're speaking to me, speak louder.
Okay.
Because I have to have you on phone. I couldn't get on the computer on the laptop.
Sounds good.
So I'd like to start off by just saying a prayer, honoring our day today. I'd like to start off the prayer within my own language, just to guide me through the teaching today. So we'll just start off with a prayer. And once I'm done the prayer, I'd like to have you conduct a sort of an introduction on who's online. So I could have a connection to whoever is listening or how many participants we have. So sort of an introduction. So yeah, I'll start off with a prayer. Mama Wokta ha Misamina Misik Magno Nan ha Basin Aspinamonan Mumachihon, Amiote Heaven ha Papon Xewatsun. Nakakiogat Mise Nakata, Josum Snanik, Nostrum Nanik, Tansutapan Nanik. I couldn't mean I get Misa and away more sustamoya. A basic Timagina on Heraki, wait up Mise, on Utamok, no Akuma, and got Mise. Achamuan hagi start tayo kanak niyo kate get misu ichi gawit mis kagi sumot taman gawit misa to taman uhaki ko gapi base na skin mo ya ang gawin na skin utgo tayo kan animo som nanik mina no kum nanik miste pot no tap misu tap misim biskos mi eksan wait me ite an so im nan hi thank you. So I'll start off with the introduction. My name is Teresa Strawberry. My Indian name is Pascal Mustoskawi Tapmat, sitting with the Buffalo Woman. And I'm an elder from Canada in Alberta, just outside of Edmonton. I speak fluent Saulteaux and Cree, means Anishinaabe. So it's I'm a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. And this is my calling. I just enjoy doing things like storytelling and talking about the history of our people and all of our teachings and so this is my passion. I love doing this kind of stuff. It's kind of difficult because technology is not my favorite thing, or I'm so far behind. I'm only old school. I like doing this in a circle, in person to person. So don't mind if I'm sometimes not comfortable in doing this in this way. So especially when my grandkids or my helpers are not around to help me with technology. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself, and I'd like to make sure that there is some interactions, and I'm glad you mentioned that there would be correspondence or people asking questions, and I don't mind telling you a little bit that I do know, but if there's things that I don't know, I'll certainly go and find the answers from my fellow elders. Hi, and I'll get you to lead to do the introductions.
So far we have, thank you, Teresa. Could you hear me all right? Can you hear me, Teresa?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so far we have 19 participants, but today's webinar would be Wisdom of Elders, women's rites of passage. And the questions we would just monitor in the chat box. As of right now, we have no questions, so we can probably go ahead and just start the presentation.
Okay. Yeah, I'll start off by saying there's through our teachings, and I want to talk historically what happened to our people and how they lived prior to this. They lived through the natural law of things. And one of the things when I say natural law is that we've been guided in through the governance of the white man way of things, and because of that, there's been so much confusion as far as the natural law of things, or how naturally things had happened within our communities and prior to the European contact. So when we talk about the rite of passage, one of the specialties that I talk about is the 4 cycles of life, and particularly for the young women when they become women, when they first become their moon time through their development and stuff like that. So that's when the rite of passage is after they have their first moon time, of the things, how natural things had happened as far as growth and that. So when I talk about that, and then even the men have the rite of passage, and how we can tell physically with the men's rite of passage or through their growth is when they start to develop that apple in the throat and their voices start to change, right? Through their growth and that. So it's that time to do that ceremony of rite of passage. So, and then there's a rite of passage to becoming an elder, a rite of passage to, to even start walking. And there's many teachings of the many things that we talk about. So the one that I talk a lot about that's so important to us is that we as women were given very special gifts, and that gift is to be able to bring life from the spirit world and to bring that life through from a spirit world through our body, and to be able to have that child with inside the mother womb for nine months, and how that child starts to develop with inside of us. See, if you can imagine within the creation or above us, where the spiritual world is in the realm of things, there's many spirits sitting out there waiting their turn to come to earth. And the creator created that system to be able to bring the spirit through us. And for an example, my kids, through creator, chose me to be the mother for them on this time of earth. They're living their lives on earth. So I was able to give birth to my children and give that life. So that way, we women are very gifted. So when we go through that moon time, we even talk about certain numbers that are very significant to our culture. Like 4 is a very significant number because of the 4 seasons, right? And then there's the significance of number 7, and that's because of the 7 sacred teachings. And then the other number that's very sacred to us is number 13. And a lot of people think that number 13 is not very sacred because it's an unlucky number. For us, it's very sacred because a woman goes through her moon time, her cycles, 13 months out of a year. And that means cleansing our body, cleansing body through the moon time. And for us, it's getting rid of the old energy, but bringing in the new energy within those 13 months, 13 moon cycles. And then when you look around, there's very visual things around us that we tend to forget, right? And one of them is that even that number 7 is when you look out in the sky, you see the dipper and you see the little dipper, the stars of the dipper, right? And the dipper has seven stars, and that represents each one of those 7 sacred teachings. And behind that, there's 7 more generations of that. So the big dipper represents the male dipper, and the small dipper represents, in our culture, female dippers, because there's always that balance, right? The male and the female. And the other one is that that I talk a lot about is the 13 moon cycle times. And that you can see in some of the turtles' back, on the harden of the back of the turtle. It's got the 13 symbols. And around it, it has 28 around its back on the outside perimeter of it. So those numbers are very sacred to us. So at the time when a woman becomes a woman at his first moon time, we would normally sort of isolate the woman, the young girl, with the grandmother or the parent until the 4th day. And then the 4th day, we would have a ceremony blessing that girl now that she has come over to the next stage of her life, becoming a woman, and giving them all the teachings that we need to give them. So at the ceremony, you would sit down 4 grandmothers that would each give a teaching. And then there would also be a celebration where you would do the feast food and giveaway, and also do the pipe at the time, because you're praying for this young woman. But also the other thing that we often do is that at the time we teach them that they have to do a berry fast. And when I say the natural berry fast for a year is sacrificing, because now she's becoming a woman, sacrificing her time with her mind, to be able to be very mindful not to eat those berries, because we're built like Mother Earth itself, right? Because Mother Earth itself, when you think about Mother Earth, how much water is in this earth, and it's basically around 70 to 80% of water within the earth. And that's how we're built also. In our bodies, there's about 70% of fluids in our body. So we're built pretty similar to Mother Earth herself. And so we often use that water for celebration too at the time. And when we use that celebration, we talk about that teaching of how we're built like Mother Earth itself. And then we often, during ceremony, this is when the young woman is connected with Mother Earth, to be able to say, okay, you're a very special woman now, because we were given this special gift from the Creator to create life like Mother Earth itself. It, through the 4 seasons, it regrowths the medicine, regrowth the water, freshen the water, and regrowth any kind of things that are growing within Mother Earth. So we give those teachings, specific teachings to that, and how to be very mindful of cleanliness, how to be very mindful with the hair, because our hair represents the strength, right? The strength of our teachings. So I'm going to stop right there for now, because I want to do some interaction. If there's any questions to so far of what I say, or not understanding where I'm coming from with those teachings.
There's no questions in the chat box so far. If anyone has a question, you can raise your hand. Okay. We have one question from Audrey. You can go ahead.
Bonjour, Anine. Manudu Mhi Binaji Koi. Audrey Indigenous. My name's Audrey, and I live in Calgary, Alberta. So I'm south of you, Teresa. My question is, I was just wondering, for people or women who haven't gone through the actual ceremonies, is there a way for them to do it when they're older?
It's never too late to get the ceremony. And oftentimes like that, we'd like to get a few women involved to get the teaching all at once, right? Because we're losing so many elders so far, right? So we try to complement one another. If we're doing the ceremony, like if we have 4 elders come in there, we'd like to have a group of women that are going through the same ceremony. So no, it's never too late. It's like receiving a name. We know a lot of our First Nation people don't have their names, whether because they've been through a 60 scoop or anything. Even those things, it's never too late for anything like that, reconnecting them with those teachings or even doing those ceremonies. Definitely, they can do it at any time.
Miigwech.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Are there any more questions? Okay, we don't have any more questions for right now, Teresa.
Okay. And so the other thing that I wanted to basically talk about during this cycle or during this time of ceremony for these women, one of the teachings that they often think about is that to be very mindful of our own powers, right? Meaning the female power, right? Because a lot of times when we have not been brought up this way, we're not mindful of the natural powers that we have. For an example, like if you get into relationships and stuff like that, you can use your own power because of your beauty or your body, you know. So you use that against men, right? And that's one of the teachings that we use a lot, is to be able to say, be mindful of your own powers, because we're nurturers and we need to be very mindful in how we do that. Even with the men, when they're being taught their ways, like they're being taught, both the men and female, is how we use the things that the Creator has given us. For an example, we all have 2 ears to be able to listen with, right? And then we have 2 eyes, because our people are really visual people, is to be able to see the beauty around us. And also 2 nostrils to be able to smell those beautiful medicines, that food. But the Creator only gave us 1 mouth, and 1 mouth is because of the ages that we go through. We go through the times where, you know, as a young child, we got to listen to the babies when they cry, is when they're hungry, right? But as we get older, we get influenced by others and other cultures, and we tend to use our mouths in a bad way. Because if you think about it, one of the greatest muscles we have, the strongest muscles we have, is our tongue. So we need to be very careful and very thoughtful in how we use that. Because if you're being put down or putting other people down, gossip is a real bad thing in a lot of our communities. So when you use it in a negative way, it really affects another person to person, right? So if you're being told you're dumb and crazy all your life, you tend to you don't forget that, right? It stays inside of you. So we got to be very mindful in how we use our tongue. Even today, when I tell my own children, like I say, I love you, but it's your behavior I dislike. So there's a difference there, right? I love you, it's your behavior I do not like, and explain myself in that way, right? So we got to be very mindful in how we use these things. As we were born, a lot of us were born with, I don't know about other cultures, but in my culture, we were put in moss bags, right? And basically to reinforce those things the creator gave us, those things that I talk about, the ears and that, the eyes. So when you're put in a moss bag, the baby is reinforced to move its head side by side and to use the eyes and to be able to hear. And those babies even hear before they are born. When they're inside their stomach, they become to recognize and connect with the parents' voices. And even the music, the drums and stuff like that, they begin to connect that. And then when they're born, they start latching on to the mother when they're feeding them so they could smell the mother's aroma or whatever it is. They start connecting in that way, right? So those things are very important. And those are the kind of teachings that a lot of the elders will talk about, even at the time of the rite of passage, right? So those things are very important because we tend to forget because there's so much information out there, technology, Facebook, and you can Google a lot of things, but these natural law of teachings, you can't really Google them. I'm thinking it's starting to get better now, as a lot of the elders are teaching these in these ways. But it's so nice to have that one-to-one teaching, or like the last lady asked, is it too late to have that ceremony? It's never too late, you know. It's never too late for any kind of ceremony and stuff like that. So my whole point to that power for women also is that we tell the women when they come for their ceremony at the time of their first moon time is that to stay away from ceremonies. That's how powerful we are. For an example, people will talk about the sun dances. Do not go to those sun dances or those uh, ceremonies to do with medicines or even to do with pipes, the tools that we were given to. We could take that power away if we're there during our moon time. So those are very significant teachings that our young women need to know about, right? And that doesn't mean you have to know your language. We do those teachings in English like we are now too. So it's very important. And then of course there's the story time tellings. Like this time of the year is time to reflect. Every 4 seasons, time to reflect what has worked for us in the past and what hasn't worked for us. And what hasn't worked for us gives us a connection of what we need to change, right? Because people don't like to be told what they need to change, but I think it's very important that we recognize what it is that we need to change as we get older, right? So that that's why we use those 4 seasons with a lot of these teachings and storytelling also. So I'm going to stop there again to see if there's any further questions.
If there is any questions, you can raise your hand.
If you don't know how to raise your hand, you can just click on reactions and push the raise hand button.
It's at the bottom. Hello. No questions so far.
Okay. The other thing that we often talk about at the Rite of Passage teachings also is the teepee setups, right? A lot of times you see women that have beautiful dresses like a jingle dress or even a traditional dress, right? And at the bottom of the traditional dress, you'll often see some of them are basically reaching Mother Earth. And as you walk through or as you dance, you're awakening that Mother Earth and letting her know that you're connected directly with Mother Earth, right? So those are part of the teachings why we wear the dresses the way we do. Especially when you go to a ceremony, make sure your dress is down to your ankles. So, you know, you're not exposing yourself or distracting the ceremonial people in how you dress. So that's why. And you know, vibrant colors are very important too, because that represents that energy of yours, right? And your own colors. A lot of time, your own colors will be given to you at the same time as you're getting your name, right? So, and also to know when you're getting your name, like for myself, I was given my birth name, right? My Indian name. And then I earned my spiritual name a few years down the road. So a lot of times you may have one or two to three or four names, different names, because sometimes it's your spirit or your color spirit or your connection to your name, right? So um, those are very important too, because that's part of the rite of passage to know those things. And that too in itself, it's never too late to like to go get your name or even your spiritual name or your spiritual colors if you don't know your spiritual colors, right? So um those are very important. There was something else. Oh, the TP. So when we get set up to do the rite of passage TPs, we will use 13 poles to the TP because there again, it's because of that 13 moon cycles, right? So, um, and they're not very big because it's the ceremony for that family or that young girl that's receiving those teachings. And those are very important, and how it's so important to know the wind spirit, to know the fire spirit and all those things, because we all believe everything has a spirit, especially the animals, right? The animals like, and there's very special animals too, particularly the ones that have humpbacks, right? So for an example, you would, when you look at a grizzly bear has a humpback. And it's because of that special gift the hump was given to him is to be able to take care of our sweetgrass, our sweetgrass that goes in the prairies and stuff like that. They're the gatekeeper for that, right? And then, of course, there's the billy goat that runs around by the mountains, and they have a humpback too. And their responsibility is the water, right? Gatekeeper for water, right? And then, of course, there's the moose, right? Moose has a humpback too, and that one is to take care of our muskeg, our our hunting grounds, because there's rat root there, there's all kinds of medicines that grow there, and they're the gatekeeper for that, right? And then of course there's the other ones, but those are the ones that from the top of my head, that any humpback animals or four-legged brothers have, there's a significance to that, and they have that special power to be able to be the gatekeepers for the many different things, right? So, yeah, so I'm gonna ask again. I'd always like interactions, because sometimes I can carry on and not have time for people to interact or even comments, questions. I tend to go through this pretty quick.
Well, we're watching if anyone raises their hand. Doesn't look like we have any questions right now.
Okay, so going back to the hair, because I often tend to skim through a lot of the teachings, we talk a lot about the hair, the strength of the hair, right? Or the length of the hair. And then you braid it into three, and when you braid it into the three strands on each side, it represents the body, mind, and spirit. And you weave that together into a braid. And that's the same thing with the sweetgrass, our medicines. And it's just to give that strength, particularly when you're smudging with the sweetgrass or any kind of medicines. It basically represents that strength, body, mind, and spirit to be able to do that. And when we do that, there's specific medicines that we use through the rite of passage too. The one we use a lot is buffalo sage, is a woman's medicine. And so when we do the rite of passage after they become women, is that we tell them to make sure they only use that certain medicine to smudge throughout the year, because that in itself too is because the other medicines we could take the power away. So we use that woman medicine to be able to smudge them, or to smudge themselves through their year of them becoming woman. So that too itself is very important. And what's our timeline like there?
We have 20 minutes.
We have
right
20
now.
minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Mhm. I would like to hear from a few people of what they've learned, or what they know about rite of passage, right? Both male or female, and stuff like that. One of the interesting things that I found that during my teachings is that the men are really wanting to learn about women's rite of passage, and because of that disconnection, and how they should respect women, right, as life givers. And so we even do those kind of teachings for the men particularly, and they get more comfortable when it's just men and the kokums or the grandmothers doing the teachings. I find it very interesting that they would want to learn, because a lot of times they're isolated from while these ceremonies are happening, right? So they don't have a clue what's happening and why it's important, and vice versa for the women too, right? For the men. So it's very important that we teach both the male and the female what's happening to the female when they're going through their rite of passages. So. Mhm.
We have a
Looks like Lindsay has her hand raised.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Lindsay from AICS. Thank you so much for your time today. I have two questions. Actually, one that just popped into my head as you're speaking about how you teach the men in your community about the women's cycle, and I think that's awesome. Do the women receive the same education as far as what the men go through? And then my next question after that was, how soon after a young lady's first moon cycle does the community encourage her to meet someone or date? Would be my next question.
Okay, to answer your first question is that a lot of times when we're doing the teachings and stuff like that, we get very specific now. At the past, we didn't. We leave that up to the parents to do it, right? Because we don't want to take away their power of parenthood, right? But in the past, they were always told to be very mindful of their maturity, right? And we're very specific nowadays because if you notice, we all notice that young girls are starting to get their moon time a lot sooner than they would have back in my day, right? So back in my day, it was 16, 17 when you'd have your moon time. Now it's like 10 or 11, right? And they develop faster. So what we do now is try to break through the different teachings into 4 segments, right? Within 4 years, we would have the family bring the young girl back as it matures, right? So we would do the teachings as a group of them. Say like 10 of them are born the same year and having their moon time the same year. We would bring them back the next year, do a bit more teaching and reinforcing that teaching, right? And reinforcing your maturity too is because in that teaching, we always say, please respect your young brothers or your older brothers when you're on your moon time, right? Don't step over their hats because you're taking away the power. We're empowering them to know their own teaching and their own power. So we would bring them back after 4 years or something, and then the parent takes over or the grandmothers take over to say, you need to wait till you're a certain maturity, right? And stuff like that. So and then that's when they talk about sexuality too, like they begin to teach them about their own sexuality when they become of age, right? And I called it pre advancing them to be able to respect their own body, right? And to be able to respect their own powers and stuff like that. So that's 2 parts of the answer to that. One is a parent's responsibility and some in the community's responsibility to reinforce those teachings 4 years after their first moon time. And so yeah, that's how we would do it in my community. Now, in regarding the teaching of the men versus the women or vice versa, it's quite interesting. More and more men are starting to want to learn because they don't understand what's happening, right? And the more we teach them, the more they begin to understand why some of the women are not allowed to come into the ceremony because the men themselves don't know. So it's the mushrooms and the kokums taking that responsibility to given that teaching to both the men and the women. And the women are always I love their first question is always like, so if we have our moon time and we know what's happening to us, the men don't have their moon time. How do they know, And I always use that example because it's a physical example is that when you begin to see that apple growing in their throats, or when you begin to see or hear their voices changing. And because today technology and everything, they're always in a room. One of the things that I identified with them before is that when a man or a woman is becoming into the age of puberty, they will tend to isolate themselves or close themselves in a room. So some of the challenges that the parents have today is that a lot of our young women and men are gamers, so we don't know if it's their time or whatever. So I said, the best way is communication. Talk about it when you're having dinner with them. Talk about it with them when you're going for a road trip or something, talk to them. I said, communication is the key to everything, right? Just coming out and ask, because sometimes you don't get time alone with your son sometimes. And sometimes it's a man's responsibility, but in reality today, a lot of women are raising their, it's always a single parent, right? It's not just the women, the men are now raising their own daughters, right? So it's a community effort, elders effort now. I say elders now because there's only a few of us now, so we all have to work together virtually like this, or, you know, like work together in reminding our young people about these teachings, or young women like yourself giving you the teaching. So for me, they're not my teaching, it's to pass on to you guys to be able to pass on these teachings, right? But going to do protocol to elders to teach them ask them for these teachings. So it's just reinforces you to learn more, right? So yeah,
Thank you.
I think I answered all three of your questions.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Oops. It looks like there's a question in the chat box also. It says, if someone is two-spirited, does it affect how they go through ceremonies?
First of all, I'd like to just say it's the ceremonies aren't any different. Actually, it's actually unique. I've been to a couple, was it last year that two-spirited person has come through and was having her moon time, but she refers to be called a he, right? Um, so we did a ceremony for her, and but also during that ceremony, I was reminded that we need to be able to give the ceremony about a two-spirited person, is that a lot of them have their own special gifts, and also empowering their gifts. A lot of them, you'll notice, they don't have their own children, right? So back in the day, they were very special in a way where they were healers. And I mean physical healers, like people that had disabilities or had major problems health-wise, physically, mentally. Um, they were the go-to people. So they had that special power of healing because and because they couldn't conceive or wouldn't have a child of their own, they wouldn't deflect whatever they pick up or whoever they heal, pick up their disease or anything, and they wouldn't be passed down to the generations behind them. So they're very unique that way. And I really love those ceremonies because it's not just, it's because a lot of times today, there's a lot of judgmental people, right? And then when I see the elders talk to them with their special gifts and stuff like that, it's so unique. It makes me emotional when I think about it, that they are unique people. They are gifted people, you know, they have special talents and stuff like that. But the ceremonies aren't any different. Um, and they go through, like, if they haven't had their sex change or anything like that, they'll still go through the moon times, right? Or even the men, they'll still go through the physical changes that they would normally go through as a man versus a woman. So it's really neat. We still give the same teachings, but we empower them with their special gifts and stuff like that. So yeah.
Lindsay, is
When-
your hand up or?
Me?
Yeah, because it's still showing the hand was up.
Oh, do I click it off? I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
No
Oh,
worries. We were
so
just double
sorry.
checking.
Okay, no, it's not.
Okay,
Lower hand, there we go. My apologies.
no worries. Are there any more questions?
Audrey again. So earlier you were mentioning for when women go into becoming elderly women. So is there another ceremony separate from that to welcome them into that stage of their life?
It really depends what their calling is. Like for an example, for me, I knew, oh, I guess my parents and everybody in my community knew what I was going to be, whether I was going to be a herbalist, a healer, or whatever. But I was chosen to be the lead of my community as far as ceremony, right? So I'm a ceremonialist. So, but because of that, so I was trained with right from the get-go when I was born. I laugh at this because I used to be very resentful because I come from a large family and all of my sisters would spend a lot of time with my mother, where I would spend a lot of time with particularly the men, but the head woman for how to do ceremonies. And I was really resentful because I didn't know how to sew, how to make hides and all that stuff. I missed out on all of that stuff, right? So I became really resentful, not knowing what my calling was. And then once I realized what I was being trained for, I was okay. So I had to be trained individually that there is going to be a time where my life cycle, my woman's cycle would stop, right? I was pre-warned when it would be stopped. So I was told that I would have my first pipe, ceremonial pipe, at once I have my first grandchild, which happened. And my second pipe would come after I have my great grandchild. So already my moon time was over, but I was being prepared by the old ladies to be able to say that you're still having your moon time. And I would say yes. And then sure enough, it was like they were right on when they said, once you have your first grandchild, that's when my cycle began to stop. And then was able to, not that you can't have a pipe prior to that, it was just my teaching. A woman will have their pipe way sometimes before my time, right? Some women get it at the early 20s to get their pipe. But for me, that's when the training happened for me, is that, okay, you're having your cycles right up until a certain age, and then it'll stop, right? And then once it stopped, then things will progress. So there's certain stages of that teaching with that too. So, yeah.
Thank you, Teresa. Do we have any more questions? Well, looks like we don't have any more questions, Teresa, and I just want to thank you for such an amazing message for the webinar.
What I would like is that with our closing and stuff like that, is I don't know if they could give you feedback of my presentation. I don't know if the length of time was good enough, or, or did I go too fast on certain areas, or, I just like to get a bit of feedback, because that helps me with this virtual meetings and stuff like that. It's so different from spirit to spirit teachings in the circle, right? So.
Yes. Yes, we can make sure we work on the feedbacks. Right now, I don't know if you're able to see the chat box. But we have a message. It's from Richard, and it was perfect. And then we have another message from Brittany. Thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone for listening for today's webinar. I just want to remind you it's been recorded. And if anyone missed out on this opportunity, you can reach out to us and we will send you a link. Also, it will be uploaded to Don Poe's YouTube channel and valbrighty.com. And then if you have any more questions on White Bison programs, you can call 719-548-1000 or email info@whitebison.org. Also, if you're interested in buying products like Red Road to Valbrighty book or meditations with Native American elders, you can visit the valbrightystore.com. And then I just want to remind that we have Valbrighty Zoom meetings every day at 12 p.m. Mountain Time. And then we have evening Zoom meetings on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And then we have in the rooms meeting on Tuesday morning and Thursday morning. And Taylor, she's been sending these flyers in the chat box. And we just want to keep you posted that the next webinar with our Valbrighty elder will be on February 28th at the same time, and will be presented by Henriana Mann. She is our Valbrighty elder as well. But we just want to thank you, Teresa, for your time and for a willingness to come and speak to us today. It's really great.
Thank you. I'm hoping that I see some of you people at our next Valbrighty conference in September.
Yes, in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.